Hello and welcome to Terrain Made Easy. My name is Jay, and in this video we're going to be taking a closer look at this product from Green Stuff World called Liquid Frost. Now if you're like me, you might have seen the YouTube video that they put out showing the product off, and I've got to admit I was pretty impressed, so I ordered a couple of bottles of the stuff. Now I might call this a review, but I'm actually just going to play around with it and see what I can achieve. The first thing that I thought of when I saw this was to see if I could make like a frozen pond very easily and very cheaply, so that's what I tried to do. But I've also whacked it on a few other bits of terrain just to see what the effect is. Is it what they said on the video, what they showed on the video? And yeah, let's have a look at what I actually got. The first thing I did was try and make a frozen pond. Now the way that I did this was very simple, and I won't go over the details too much, but basically I cut out a pond-esque kind of shape out of EPVC, and then I did some homemade sculptor mold very quickly around the sides. And when I say homemade sculptor mold, all I actually did was mix some plaster of Paris together with some water, and then I literally just shoved in some tissue paper directly into the mixing bowl and mixed it all together. And then once that had sort of dried, and it did sort of actually break off in places, and I've glued it back, so don't look too much into the quality of the pond, and I'll get into why at the end. But once I'd got my basic shape, I just give it a little spray paint, because EPVC can be a little bit like hydrophobic, as in the water doesn't spread evenly, it wants to sort of contract. So I gave it a spray paint first, but I left the middle flat. Then I came in with a bit of a dry brush of a light blue, just to give it that sort of like frozen effect. And I actually did two ponds, because on one of them I wanted to just go straight onto the EPVC, and then on the other one I actually got some gloss varnish, which you could use Mod Podge gloss or something like that if you wanted, but I used this gloss varnish on my modular rivers, which I'll try and put a link up if I can remember. Yeah, so on one of them I did gloss varnish, and on the other I did straight on with the liquid frost. Now for the one where it was straight onto the EPVC, which had just been primed, basically I noticed that it was contracting. Now I'm not necessarily going to assign this just to the EPVC, because that is essentially something that happens with this product, I believe, and I believe it's actually intentional, so it's not a slight on the product, but it basically contracted it into I did an even spread out of the whole thing, and it contracted into, say, like one area. And I've got to admit though, the area that it did contract to really did look like a frozen lake. So I tried to, go back over that with some more liquid frost to try and maybe like blend it in, and I could never really achieve that effect again. I think it's mainly to do with the thickness that you put it on, but it was very hard to actually control that. So what I noticed there, as I said, it straight onto the EPVC, it contracted and it sort of had its own little like pools, which is fine, but the effect is almost exactly as you would expect, very frost-like. I tried to go over it in areas again, maybe like blend in the areas where it had pulled away. I did another thin layer, and I could never really quite get it to be nice, flat, smooth frost effect. On the one where the gloss had dried, I did the same thing. I did a nice thinnish, relatively thin layer of the liquid frost, and I basically got the same kind of result. It pooled up. So it could be the fact that what I'm putting it onto might cause the pooling, but I actually think it's the product itself. So once it had all dried, my plan was to cover the edges in snow, but I'm actually just not going to bother, because I basically ruined the piece in a minute, and I'll show you how. Once it had all dried, I said to myself, right, I'm not getting an even coverage. So what I'm going to do is go the opposite effect. I'm going to actually just cover it all in a very thick layer on both of them. And whilst it's produced an interesting result, it's not produced an effect that's like a lake. It is very much more like frost, which, to be fair, the name is liquid frost, it's not liquid ice. So this is no slight on the product. But yeah, making a ice like pond, not really a viable thing to do. You could maybe I should have done a very thin layer, and maybe that would have worked, but yeah, as I said, I was getting those contractions. So I'm not actually going to bother putting the snow on the sides. That's why I wasn't really worried about the paint job if I'd missed bits, because I was going to cover it in snow, but the end result just simply isn't what I wanted for terrain purposes. And actually on one of them you can still see, even though it was a relatively thick layer, it's still sort of contracted away, and instead of making one even layer, it's made uneven sections. I've got to admit though, it is fun to crunch it, because it does actually feel a little bit like ice, but warm. Now that's not the fault of the product. Basically I was trying to do something that it didn't say to do. Their examples didn't show that on the YouTube video, and it was something I was like, when I saw the bottle, I was like, we'll try it for a terrain piece, and quite frankly, it just didn't pay off. That's not to say that's the product's fault. You know, I wouldn't blame a drill for not letting me watch TV on it. If you're using a product for something it's not designed for, of course that's not going to be the effect. As I said, it doesn't say liquid ice, it says liquid frost. And I've got to say, the actual frost effect is very nice. And I did do this on a couple of other pieces. So one of the pieces I used was from the 1 hour build that I did. And it's just like egg cartons. But I did it because it was a desert coloured. It's an orangey browny base, and I thought, well, frost doesn't really belong on that, so it'll really pop out, and pop out it does. And the contraction is something that I see. I can definitely see it's contracted like on the base and stuff like that. On the side of the egg cartons, it's a very subtle effect, but you do sort of see that like frosting that you would associate with a cold morning or something like that. And I actually got to say, I really, really like that effect. I think that's incredible. And then I also did it on a little like planter, which is basically just something that I made, like a little rectangular box that I put some Green Stuff World bushes in. And I sort of did it on 1/2 just to see what the effect would be. And again, I've got to admit, like, I don't know if the camera will pick it up because it's the way that the light bounces off it and stuff like that. So, but really it's got some very nice subtle effects on it that really strongly remind you of frost. And that works on the bush, and you can sort of very clearly see where it's been and where it's not been, and the effect is fantastic. So I have no reason to believe that the images that you see on the Green Stuff World YouTube channel are not representative of the product. I mean, why would they? It's a reasonably cheap bottle. I forgot how much I paid for this, maybe like €4, something like that, per bottle, and I got 2 of them, so I think I paid like €11 delivered. Yeah, I've no reason to think that, I mean, my effects have basically shown what they have in the video. I think it looks better in certain situations. Of course, it's not going to look fine on a desert thing. That's intentional. I tried that to really get it to pop, and it does seem to have this way of sort of contracting a little bit. It sort of like contracts, and that's the thing that leaves the little shards. Now, I'm not a chemist, I don't know exactly how it's working, but it looks like frost in a bottle. And yeah, if I was reviewing it and I was giving it a score, I'd be giving this a solid 9 out of 10. I can't, as I said, I can't blame the product for not doing a frozen ice river, because that's not what it says on the bottle. On the bottle it says liquid frost, and that's what it is. It's liquid frost. It's fantastic. It's something I would probably use maybe on like diorammas or your model bases. It's not something I see an application for in terms of big terrain pieces. I personally don't, well, it'd be very expensive to do like a whole 6 foot by 4 foot board with this stuff. It's more for your smaller scale projects. So as I said, like your miniature bases or dioramas, I think you can get some really good effects with it. So if that's something you're looking at, interested in making soon, and you really want a frost effect, well, this stuff is incredible. I've been trying to work out if you could sort of like make a homemade version of it, and I really just don't even know where you would begin. It sort of feels like a medium of sorts, like a gloss medium that contracts. I was like, what if you got a gloss medium and crackle paste? And I was like, that way the loony bin lies, because I have no idea what I'd be doing. I'd just be mixing stuff together to try and get stupid effects. But it's not that expensive, so I just buy some, and that's the best review I can give it. So I really enjoyed playing with the stuff. It's a shame I didn't get a nice, easy frozen river, but you know, there's other ways of making frozen rivers. I just wanted like, you can just brush it on and it's done. That's a shame. But the frost effect, very good. So yeah, a little bit of a weird video. I do have another video coming like in the next couple of days. So do subscribe if you're interested in seeing that. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks to my Patreons as well. I do really appreciate the ever-growing community we've got there. Have a most beautiful day. Goodbye.